Hello everybody and welcome to another deck tech, deck guide, deck what have you here at Playing Board Games. I'm Justin, and today I have a Kohaku Narukami deck which is blessed to pass tests. That's the vibe we're going for. Why don't we check this thing out? So for this deck, Kohaku is leaving his curse side behind and instead embracing the bless. We dive 100% in on combat in this deck. While we can use our book 4 to investigate, this is a heavy combat deck. It's only fair, because we're diving in on combat, to dive in 100% on bless. With our blessed blade, our blessed ally, and our blessed covenant, we will pass all the tests that we want to pass. Notably, in this series that I'm doing on the channel, I'm taking my first idea for an investigator and throwing it out, and sometimes I'm taking my second idea for an investigator and throwing it out. There's a lot of options that you can take Kohaku. He's very good in terms of deck build diversity, so it was having a hard time for me to settle on just one to explore, but I went with this one because I think it's going to be pretty sweet. So why don't we get this thing going? You can find a link down in the video description to the deck, by the way. Here are all the sets required. Luckily, we only have one more cycle that we need to get boxed up, and double luckily, at the day of recording this video on the 13th of June, they announced that the Innsmouth Conspiracy rebox is coming out, I think, in September and October, which is pretty sweet. So we're finally going to get that kind of like all cooked up and ready to rock, and then you won't need to worry about this. So if you don't have these, it is probably advised to wait until that, or proxy the cards alternatively until you want to get them. There's a lot that comes from Innsmouth because this is Blessed Curse, and Kohaku is Blessed Curse, like that's kind of his whole thing. And also, like, generally with his ability, we're going to be looking at putting in more more curse tokens because of how it works, but we'll get there as we dive in. Here's the level 0 version of the deck. I don't want to spend too much here. The level 0 version is kind of just like the starting point that I would go with this deck. Again, with all of these videos, while these decks are mostly conceptual, they are from experience playing Kohaku. I do test out some of the options that we have here, but a lot of it is just like theory crafting with an investigator. I've played a lot of ARKHAM. My decks aren't necessarily combo decks. They're just like Justin-style decks, or like find a few key pieces and use those key pieces to win. So they're less like elaborate and like crazy combo decks that come with it. But feel free to change things for how you see fit. I'm only one guy, and you can do a better perspective for that. Here's what the final version of the deck looks like. As you can see, there are some big changes going into the final version compared to the level 0. So this deck is going, as I said, all in on Bless tokens. With Kohaku's ability, we're probably going to be adding in Curse tokens. The question is, do you want to add in Curse tokens with his ability? Yes, because it means that eventually, if there's 2 Curse tokens and 2 Bless tokens, you are going to want to be taking Kohaku's ability to take an additional action during this turn. That is very nice. Yeah, so here's the deck. As I always do, I'll go by card, and then we'll look at upgrade order as well. First up, Blessed Blade, our weapon of choice. This awesome blade does 2 things. First, it allows us to chop without spending any ammo or charges, and it adds and keeps blessed tokens in the bag. Notably, we only have 5 attack with the blade. Kohaku is not like kitted out to like be able to fight like, I don't know, like a Mark Harrigan or even like a Zoe Samaras with the Blessed Blade, but we still can get this working. We have other tools to help ensure that we pass tests when we need to pass tests, and you'll want to exhaust the blade once per turn, if possible, to ensure the bag is loaded with Blessed tokens. Don't be surprised at how good Blessed Blade is at putting Blessed tokens into the bag. The question is, you might be thinking, can we fight with just the Blessed Blade? And the answer to that generally is yes. Blessed Blade is a very good weapon, even if you're only attacking at 5. However, we have some other tools to make ourselves more consistent, especially when it comes to dealing with boss enemies as well. Ancestral Token, the other card here, is another way for us to drop burst Blessed tokens into the bag. However, it's not the end-all be-all method of choice in our deck, which is why it ends up as a 1-of in our final version, because you'd be surprised at how good the Blessed Blade is at keeping the bag loaded. The reason it's so good at that is because With Blessed Blade, you're kind of just doing a flurry of blows. You're just like stab, stab, stab. And normally, when you resolve a Blessed token, you have to remove it from the cup. But if you're just doing all your tests on Blessed Blade and it is, you know, drawing Blessed tokens, you get the effect of them and they go back into the bag afterwards, which is really nice. But let's talk about like the big payoff here. So what are we doing with all these Blessed tokens? And the answer to that is passing our MFN tests like nobody's business. We have Ancient Covenant. This is our big payoff to Blessed tokens. It's going to allow us to automatically pass the test we want to pass. We have other tools that can ensure that we get Blessed tokens when we want them, but the idea is that if you hit a random Ancient Covenant Blessed token, you might as well just do it. Going a step further, I'm going to just jump to both Favor of the Sun and Book of Living Myths, because what they allow us to do is dig out the Blessed token that we want. Favor of the Sun, obviously pretty easy because we will be, you know, resolving the tokens there. They're sealed, but with Book of Living Myths, it's when a Chaos token will be revealed at your location, you can exhaust Book of Living Myths to search the Chaos bag for a Blessed or Cursed token, whichever there are more of, and resolve it instead. So funny story, I actually thought the Book of Living Myths did whichever there was less of, but no, it does whichever there are more of. So it's actually pretty gameable either way, but it just means that that's the reason why we are going so hard on the Blessed tokens. Does our deck crumble without Book of Living Myths? Absolutely not. But what Book of Living Myths does, it basically just ensures that every turn we can activate our Ancient Covenant, which is a pretty powerful effect. Jumping back to Jacob Morrison, this is why the deck is called Blessed to Pass Tests, because we're going to be passing tests like when we want to. This also helps mitigate some of the weakness that we have with only having 5 Fist. We have no static way to boost it as far as I'm aware, so I went with Jacob Morrison instead. This can also help us for Mythos tests, and we're going to be revealing a lot of Blessed tokens, so Jacob Morrison is going to be readying all the time. The reason why we are going with both Favor of the Sun and Book of Living Myths is because if you're not a Blessed deck unless you have control of when you can pull Blessed tokens built into your deck. Otherwise, you're just a deck putting Blessed tokens into the cup. You only become a Blessed token if you are taking advantage purposely of the Blessed tokens that you put into the deck. And that's what both Favor of the Sun and Book of Living Myths do, and that's why why this is actually a Blessed deck. So you can see that the gameplay loop is pretty simple. These cards right here are kind of what the deck is, right? We get Blessed Blade, we get Favor of the Sun, Jacob Morrison, the Book of Living Myths, and we're going to be using those to just draw Blessed tokens. The gameplay loop is very simple, and basically everything else from here on is to give us more damage options or give us more card selection to help us get there. Here are some of our more damage options to help us give us more security in that. Well, we obviously want to find Blessed Blade in our mulligan. Sometimes that won't happen, so we have Branded Cthugga to represent 6 damage that we can use. I like it over Shriveling, even though it does cost 1 experience. You could change it, mileage may vary, but it's 6 guaranteed damage, which I think is nice. 6 guaranteed is, I think, hard to say no to. Radiant Smite is our method for dishing out big hits of damage. This is on bosses or high health enemies because it can deal a lot of damage. You want to also time it so that you don't kill it. So if you don't kill it with the Blessed Blade, right, on the first attack, you want to get some blesses in, load up with the Smite. If it doesn't kill it, that's great. If it does kill it, it's not terrible, right? Because if it does defeat the enemy, the sealed tokens go to the token pool, otherwise you release them. It's not terrible because you will be able to refill up the bag pretty early, but it's just something to consider with the song and dance that comes with Radiant Smite. But don't forget this card, it's very powerful, and it also lets us use our brain if we want to, which I don't see why you would choose to use your fist over the brain, likewise with Branded Cthugga. Finally, we have Spectral Razor because it's just a great card at dealing damage. Very nice. Next up, we have some economy options here. Voice of Ra is the first heavy hitter. Notably, this card is in the deck with the taboo list in mind. The taboo list made it so that this now says symbol token. So that means bless tokens, for example. So you could probably pretty reliably hit for 5 or 7 resources. And like Voice of Ra, the Jewel of Aureolus is now in the deck with the taboo in mind. This is when we get to the upgrade path, this is a later edition. I'll talk about it a bit more when we get there. But this is just a good way. It also says symbol. So now when you draw a bless, you can gain cards, gain resources or draw cards. And that's, you know, pretty groovy. And then we got Faustian Bargain, which is just easy money. So luckily with Kohaku's ability, we can use it as essentially feeding us an extra action on the next turn. Assuming nobody draws the curse tokens and resolves them. However, if nobody draws the curse, if somebody draws the curse token and resolves them, congratulations, they probably weren't affected by the curse tokens that bad. So it's just like we're putting these in the cup to remove them as soon as possible to use with our ability. We want to be looking at the bottom part of Kohaku's ability as much as we can, because more actions just means more go, and it means less curse tokens, because in this deck we're not vibing with curse tokens. As I said, like basically the Ancient Covenant loop of like using the Book of Living Myths is kind of like where the deck is living most, and everything else here is kind of just gravy on top of it. Cat Mask is here to just give us some further gravy on top of it. It boosts our fist as we need when swinging our weapon. It also can, you know, use the brain if it needs be. But I like this for the fist boost that it can provide. We don't have a way to put Doom on cards built into our deck, and that's okay. The idea is that it'll refill passively. If you get it out in the first agenda, you'll get some Doom on it pretty when the new agenda comes out, when an Acolyte appears. However, we also have some sacrifices. So the sacrifices is a way that we can turn our Cat Masks into resources, or an empty Brand of Cthugha, for example. While I have the sacrifice as a 1-of in my build, it wouldn't hurt to have it as a 2-of. Add this or remove the other guts in the deck if you're craving some additional blood sacrifice. So don't be afraid to empty your Cat Mask and just like look at it as just like 2 overpowers when needed. And alternatively as well, don't be afraid to commit to a test, because sometimes your kit's set up and you don't need to spend actions playing an asset just because it's in your hand. I think that's the level where you can level up a lot of your ARKHAM, and it's when you realize I don't need this asset and instead look at the skill icons on it. And you won't always need Cat Mask, but when you do, it's going to do a nice little job for you. Keeping this going, we got Tempt Fate. Tempt Fate has a lot of use in Kohaku. It can give us blessed tokens we may need to get ourselves rolling, or it can be additional action if you played it before your turn. It also replaces itself, meaning that firing this off will immediately turn it into another card from your deck. Obviously, I think this is kind of like a staple in Kohaku. I'd be hard-pressed to find a reason not to run this. Like, you could definitely side out of it, but it is basically just like draw a card, put a bless and curse token in the bag, and gain an action. Because you do it like right before your turn, and then you can take like 4 actions on your turn just for no cost, just a slot in your deck. So it's really nice in Kohaku. Yeah, I think it's just really good there. Ward of Protection offers us Mythos Protection, and that's always welcome. Nice, especially for the foot icons. Our foot is only 1 with Kohaku, so having some mitigation for that is really good. And Occult Reliquary is here to give us another slot for our Ancestral Token and the Jewel of Aureolus. However, but it can also allow us to hold 2 Blessed Blades and a Book of Living Myths. It isn't a priority upgrade, I don't think, as we're not relying too much on these cards all being at once out in our build. It's kind of like a little bit of redundancy in the slots. We only need 1 Blessed Blade. If we can have 2 Blessed Blades and the Book of Living Myths, like, obviously that's sick, because we can add 4 Blessed tokens in on our turn and still draw a Bless thing. If we can have the Ancestral Token and the Jewel of Aureolus in play, that's also kind of sick. But ultimately, this is kind of like gravy once we get really deep into our Sunday. Our last 3 cards here are our skills. Pretty simple. Guts is good. It's an easy swap if you want to have something else, or if the deck goes past 29 XP. I just think Guts is just a good card. It helps with the Mythos phase and the Brand of Cthugha, which means it's always relevant. Overpower is here to boost our Blessed Blades and to be a cantrip in our deck. That means you're going to want to commit it early and turn it into another card. You could wait for like higher health enemies, but that's what your Ancient Covenant is for, and your Book of Living Myths is for. So it's like one of those things where Overpower also could be sided out as you get further in, but it's just look at it like I want to turn this into another card ASAP because it'll help me find some of the other better cards in my deck. And then we have Promise of Power. What's there to say about Promise of Power that hasn't been said? Card's just really good. It also counts as a half action for Kohaku because it's one of the 2 curse tokens you need to trigger his ability. On to our upgrade path here. So this one is a little bit, it's in batches. As always, I will say that you can follow your own upgrade path with this idea. Because these decks are theory crafting, the idea is that I throw this out there for you to look at and be like, hey, I want to try this exactly as is or modify it for my own playstyle. This is a deck built with my playstyle in mind, and my playstyle is very, very me, and it doesn't necessarily translate to your playstyle as well. I did these one in batches because you can kind of see what you need as you need it. Notably, the first batch is kind of what we need to get the deck going. Like say you get 6 XP in the first scenario, you want to buy a Blessed Blade 4 and an Ancient Covenant. Easy. And then you want to make sure you get like both your Blessed Blades just upgraded so you can always make sure that you're using the actual like playable version of the card. While this deck will be a little funky in the first scenarios generally don't throw a lot at you, so you can use the regular Blessed Blade, you can use your kill spells to get going. You can also like add even additional kill spells, like you can play like Shriveling instead of Explosive Ward, for example. Like these are all things that you could just do to modify it if you were a little bit worried. I wouldn't, but I'm a crazy person, so you know, do as I say, not as I do. Or do as I do. Do it. Don't do as I do. Just don't do as I do is what I'm saying. But you can also do what I do. I don't really care. Next batch here, upgrading the explosive wards into the Brand, Jacob, and Favor of the Sun. Again, these can all modify depending on the experience you get. Our Drain Essence, we want to turn into Radiant Smites, our Guts into a Sacrifice. And then as you can see, the last batch, which is the Ancestral Token, into the Jewel of Aureolus 3. And the Occult Reliquary 3. This deck can also go with upgraded Spectral Razor. You don't need to follow this path exactly. If you want to play the kind of more event slinging thing, I think you can modify it pretty easily. With this path, I personally push Jacob and our Brand out of the decks and move the Occult Reliquary and Jewel of the Aureolus to a higher priority. The reason for this is that Jacob and Brand don't really work too much in this game plan of looping the Spectral Razors. But what it does do is it allows us to, with the Jewel of Aureolus earlier in our deck, which I spelled wrong on the bottom. How embarrassing. What it allows us to do is turn the Blessed tokens, because the idea is that we're still Ancient Covenanting, using the Book of Living Myths to grab, or like the Favor of the Sun, to grab a Blessed token, which is going to allow us to play our Spectral Razor again back into our hand. Then we use the Jewel to pay for the Spectral Razor, essentially. Also, in a way to work this as well is obviously Olive McBride 2. It's a different deck, so that's why I didn't include it, but I did still want to like mention it, that it is a path that you could take with this deck, alternatively to what we have here. This is the deck. It's, as I said, the gameplay loop is very simple. I built a very similar deck with Will Yorick. I just wasn't using Blessed Blade. It was just using the Favor of the Sun and recurring it. And with Ancient Covenant, it is a very powerful effect. And Kohaku has Book of Living Myths built into his entire, like he has like a Favor of the Sun built into his kit. The Book of Living Myths is a very powerful card, and it's good, especially with an Ancient Covenant. Again, when a Chaos token be revealed to your location, exhaust Book of Living Myths, search the Chaos bag for a Bless or Curse token, whichever there are more of, which is going to be the Bless tokens, and resolve it. That works very well with the Ancient Covenant, and you can just see, like, again, the gameplay loop is like very simple, and all the other deck around it is about finding or supporting that gameplay loop. So swing that Blessed Blade and go nuts. What do we do about the Weeping Uri? We just let it hit us. Or we just kill it. You know, we just don't draw the Force Blessed token. He'll go down pretty easy to the Blessed Blade. Yeah, that's this Kohaku deck. I think it's a pretty neat one. As again, like, it's very similar to a Will Yorick deck I played, so I know this one will function. It has a little bit like, it's always with Mystics, you're kind of worried about the card draw, but with like Sacrifice, the Tempt Fate, If you get the Jewel of Aureolus out early, if you want it, like if you're feeling it, you could move it. I think that this one is like going back to the upgrade path. There's a lot of changes you could make to the upgrade path to make this deck work better for you in campaign play. Again, these are theory crafting decks, so it's kind of one of those things that if you see it in action, you're going to just need to modify depending on how it feels. Like, that's kind of like one of those things. I think like a true solid upgrade path actually is kind of disingenuous, and you kind of just have to adapt to what the scenarios and the campaigns are giving you and how the deck is feeling as you are playing it. With all that said, keep your eyes open. I got a Hank Samson deck. I had some trouble with it. It took me like 5 decks, but I finally got a Hank Samson deck that I think is actually neat and I think super fun for this series. As again, I'll be looking beyond just what my first instinct for the investigator is and trying to find something a little bit unique that is also still just super spiky because I'm a super spike baby. And then after Hank Samson in July, I think, yeah, in July, we're going to start doing the core set investigators. So that should be pretty fun. Thank you for all your support on this series. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more. You know, just like any sort of interaction with the video is helpful. Liking, commenting, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in 2 weeks to talk about Hank Samson.